Hello everyone, once again another deck profile, this time on the first of my deck profiles for set 5, which is the cover, the Liael Odium deck. Cool design, Gear Chronicle like aesthetic, which is why I built the deck in the first place. Especially since Amorta already interests me, but the playstyle didn't, so I just ended up not building that one, but when this one got revealed, the playstyle interested me, so I ended up playing this one. And I have to say one thing already, the deck is quite expensive, especially making the generics, because the generics got expensive thanks to this deck as well. But anyway, for a Dark State deck, this one doesn't really actually focus on soul. So that's a rare sight to see, but there's few weaknesses with this deck already that during playtesting is that it is a turn 4 finisher deck, at least if you can get this proper setup. And another thing is that you do use a bit of counterblast, and right now there's really not too many ways of countercharging except through the cat, which I do run. But other than that, this deck is actually pretty strong. It's a 3 attack deck basically, so use that to your advantage, especially for your 3 powerful attacks. Divine Skill makes a fancy 6 attack deck, but that's only one time use only, and that's your finisher turn, so you better finish off your opponent then and there. But other than that, there's really not much to say about it other than basically it's a cool looking design deck that is female Gear Chronicle, and it's basically a self-hatred version of Liael Amorta. But anyway, let's begin with the deck profile, with of course the ride deck. So first off, before we go to the ride deck, here's the Destined Timepiece. You have to run this card because this is basically your set order as a token, which will be placed with the grade 1 by the way, and it absolutely does nothing other than put your gauges there. That's really all it does. In which now we go to the ride line itself. Here's the starter. I know you don't need to run this starter, you could actually run any starter you wish. But we go to the grade 1, Steam Made into Glut, where when you ride it on top of grade 0, you reveal your grade 3 Liael Amorta, which you're guaranteed to ride that anyway, and your opponent kind of would already know by default if you ride this, to put your Destined Timepiece to the order zone. So that's just here for setup, not much to explain here. But we go to the grade 2, which is the Colossus, where when riding on top of the grade 1, so it makes the grade 1 necessary for you to ride, choose a card from your hand to put in the regress gauge, so basically timepiece, and then now you just put stuff on there, and then you draw 2 cards. But anyway, now it's time to go to the grade 3, Liael Odium, in which she has 3 skills. The first one is a continuous, where for each copy of Distorted Bane in your regress gauge, or quote-unquote order zone, plus 5k to your whole front row, which stacks, so it's not too bad, but it is the order card of the deck, and you only have 4 copies, and you only have one way to get it, basically. With the second skill, where when this card attacks, Soul Blast 1, choose a card from your rear guard or hand to put the regress gauge, and it gets the triple drive ability. Keep in mind with the rulings, because if you do get drive -1, you basically get triple drive with a -1 drive, because this is going to relate to the third skill, but overall it's a pretty powerful skill, especially since it helps you increase your regress gauge, especially for your last skill, where it's the Divine Skill. The Divine Skill, at the end of the battle of this card attack, if you have 5 or more regress gauges, you can discard 2 cards from your hand, and you get 1 additional turn with a drive -1, with a skip of your main phase and your ride phase. So that's a very powerful Divine Skill, skipping your opponent's turn, basically giving you 3 more attacks, which is going to be something very big. Also, skipping your opponent's turn also means that all the power increase that they got in their first turn on your turn will be all nullified, but it also resets you as well, so that's another thing. But luckily you have battle phase abilities, so it will actually negate part of this. But the additional power like Persona Ride you don't have anymore, keep that one in mind. But overall it's a powerful Divine Skill that basically lets you finish off your opponent with 3 more attacks. And now to the main deck itself. First off, we of course have to run 3 more copies just for Persona Ride. And then we go to the main card itself, which is our order card, Distorted Bane. You have to run 4 of these because it's the most important card, like I said. So first off, you play it if your Vanguard's Liael, you soul charge 1, and then you put in the regress gauge. That itself is very important already, because as you can tell from Liael's Divine Skill, it requires 5. And Liael herself only generates 1. The grade 2 generates 1, so that's 2. And since you're playing 1 order per turn with this, yeah, that's going to be 3 in that first grade 3 turn. So during your 4th turn, when you play this plus Liael's skill, you get 5. So that's why it's very important to see this as soon as you can, because this card puts itself as the regress gauge as it is. But the second skill is that when it's put as regress gauge, you draw a card and then choose one of your Vanguards plus 10k. So it helps Liael with power, and also of course with Liael's skill for each copy of itself, it's going to give you even more power, so you just have to run 4 by default. And luckily you could also put this from the drop zone to the regress gauge with other means, but you do want to actually play this physically as its own skill. And then next up we run the Anchorness Dragon. So the skill is that at the beginning of your battle phase, while this card is on the gauge zone, you can counterblast 1, choose a card from your drop zone and put it as regress gauge, and then call this to rear guard. And this is what I mean that you have some battle phase abilities, because this is basically nice recursion, basically like the Prison Dragon or Liael as a deck. And also you can call this on grade 2 turn, which is also very nice. But the next skill is that when this card attacks a Vanguard, if you have at least a grade 3 Liael until the end of the battle, plus 5k, and then if you have at least 3 gauges, you can energy blast 2 to retire one of your opponent's rear guard. Nice that you also have some removal option, but this is basically like Prison Dragon for the deck, especially for the fact that you can spam early. And also it's your main gauge target, so you just have to run 4. And then we go and now to the grade 2 lineup. So first off, the 4 Colossus. When placed on rear guard and you have a gauge, you can counterblast 1 to draw a card and then soul charge 1. Helps out with soul a bit. Odium herself uses soul, but luckily this deck doesn't really use soul too often, so it's fine. But the second skill is that if you have at least 3 gauges, this card gets the boost ability. Just overall here, just to help you set up your plays. But more importantly, the draw, because you want to see Distorted Bane as soon as you can. And then we go to the Order Engine card, which is the Flame Blazing Demonic Lady. So when it's placed by card ability other than from Order, you can Soul Blast 1, look at top of your deck to choose one card that's grade less than or equal to your Vanguard to call it. And when this card attacks, you can Soul Blast 2 to draw a card and give it plus 5k power into the end turn. It's here as a good option to just basically call another card. And there's this one card in particular that you do kind of want to call just to get your Distorted Bane as soon as you can. And it's also because Distorted Bane is an Order card, so you just have an Order Engine for the deck. And then here's the generic that Energy Blast is 3 to draw a card, just because you do want to draw. I would run a 3rd copy if I do have it, but I do see myself taking this out immediately when more support comes, so I'm not going to do that. And then we go to Ablaze Chimera. Any deck would actually ask for this because this is for Liael, where when placed on rear guard, if you have at least a grade 3 Vanguard Liael counterblast 1, look at top 5 cards to your deck. 2 superior call 1 grade 3 or less card from among them to rear guard. Yes, Liael gets its own basically generic superior call engine, which in itself is already pretty nice. But you don't really have to run that many because you do have a lot of draw power and superior call as is, like the Dragon. But one card that you do really want to play is basically the Order Searcher, because this one lets you discard a card from hand to search for one order from your deck to put it in the drop zone. But during the turn, if you play that order, you put it at the bottom of the deck instead of, put it in it from the drop because it's already at the drop. But for the Distorted Bane, it actually immediately goes to the regress gauge. So it's just basically another way for you to search your Distorted Bane. And it's actually the only way right now, so you do really need to run 4 of these until they actually have other ways to basically search your Distorted Bane, because it's the most important card of the deck. And then I run 2 cats, mainly for the counter charge, because the deck can use a bit of counterblasts. And then finally 4 PGs, because PGs. OT, 8 crits, 3 draws, so you can draw as soon as you can for the Distorted Bane. And also 4 heals, 2 being counter heals. So that's it for this deck profile of my Liael Odium deck. What do you guys think of it? What other cards would you recommend? And what other changes would you make? Honestly, I've been liking the deck as it is so far, especially with how many generics that you can run and the playstyle of it. And I'm going to be very honest, even with the amount of different choices that you can play and the amount of space you got for generics, there are very specific generics that you really want to run right now, just because the fact that you got a very important order card in the deck that you have to see as soon as possible. But other than that, it's a cool design. Brings back the Gear Chronicle aesthetic in a way, kind of plays back Gear Chronicle playstyle with a fancy way of binding without basically stealing Gear Chronicle's playstyle. It's just a very cool deck. But other than that, that's it for this, and see you all next time.